My name is Haley Matthews, and I'm 29 years old. 6 months ago, I gave up my apartment to help my parents through a financial crisis. I thought it was temporary. But yesterday, I froze while scrolling through Instagram. There was my sister Katie's post. Many thanks to my parents for letting me move into their beautiful apartment. Home sweet home. I stared at my phone, unable to process what I was seeing. The apartment in those pictures was mine. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless and confused. Before I share this painful family story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever made sacrifices for family that weren't appreciated. Trust me, this story about generosity, betrayal, and standing up for yourself is one you won't want to miss. Growing up, I always believed my family was close-knit. My dad Tom worked as a sales manager at a manufacturing company for over 20 years, while my mom Linda was an elementary school teacher before her rheumatoid arthritis forced her into early retirement 3 years ago. My younger sister Katie, 26, and I were raised with the mantra that family comes first. At least, that's what I thought we all believed. After graduating with my nursing degree, I worked double shifts at Boston Children's Hospital for 7 years, living with 2 roommates in a cramped apartment, eating ramen noodles, and saving every penny I could. My goal was always clear: to own my own place. When I finally saved enough for a down payment on a small 2-bedroom apartment in a decent neighborhood in Boston, it was the proudest moment of my life. "You're the first Matthews to own property," my dad said at my housewarming party, raising a plastic cup of champagne. "We couldn't be prouder of you, honey." The apartment wasn't fancy by any means, but it was mine. 900 square feet of hardwood floors, large windows that let in morning light, and a small balcony where I grew herbs in the summer. I spent weekends painting the walls, replacing the outdated bathroom fixtures, and hunting through thrift stores for furniture. Each improvement made it feel more like home. "I can't believe you redid the kitchen backsplash yourself," my friend Amber said during one of our Sunday brunches at my place. "This apartment is so you, Haley." It was true. Every corner reflected my personality and hard work. The living room bookshelf filled with medical textbooks and mystery novels. The framed nursing certificate hanging in the hallway. The collection of coffee mugs from hospitals where I'd done training. This apartment represented every overtime shift, every vacation I'd skipped, every sacrifice I'd made. Meanwhile, my sister Katie was on a different path. After dropping out of community college, she worked as a part-time yoga instructor while, in her words, finding herself. She lived in a shared apartment with 3 roommates, frequently traveled to music festivals, and seemed allergic to commitment of any kind. "Not everyone needs to be so conventional, Haley," she told me once when I suggested she might want to consider a more stable career. "We can't all be perfect like you." I wasn't perfect, far from it. I was just responsible. But somehow in our family dynamic, my responsibility had become something Katie resented. The first hint of my parents' financial troubles came during a Sunday dinner at their house about 7 months ago. I noticed the thermostat was set unusually low, and Mom was wearing 2 sweaters despite it being September. "Is the heating broken?" I asked, rubbing my arms for warmth. My parents exchanged a look across the table. "We're just being energy conscious," Mom said too quickly. "The bills have been high lately." Dad pushed his food around his plate. "The company's going through some changes. They're downsizing the sales department. Nothing to worry about." But the worry lines creasing his forehead told a different story. Dad was 58, not an easy age to find a new job if he lost this one. 2 weeks later, my mom called to cancel our shopping trip. "I'm just not feeling up to it," she said, her voice tight in the way it gets when she's hiding something. I drove to their house instead of texting, concerned about her health. When I arrived, I found her at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and an old-fashioned calculator. "Mom, what's going on?" She tried to gather the papers quickly, but not before I saw the past due stamps and the letter from their mortgage company. "It's nothing," she insisted. "Your father doesn't want you girls worrying about this." "About what exactly?" I pressed. After some gentle prodding, the truth came out. Dad's hours had been cut by 40%. Mom's medication for her rheumatoid arthritis had increased in price by almost $200 a month. They had missed 2 mortgage payments already, and the bank was sending warning letters. "Does Katie know about this?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "You know how she is. She's got enough going on trying to establish herself. And she couldn't help even if she wanted to." That night, I lay awake in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my parents' struggles. I had some savings, but not enough to help them make mortgage payments long term. I could offer them a few $1,000s, but that would only delay the inevitable. Besides, their house was too expensive for them to maintain on their reduced income. I thought about offering to let them move in with me temporarily, but my apartment was small. Where would everyone sleep? How would we manage with 1 bathroom? And selfishly, I worried about losing my independence after working so hard to establish it. "You need to be careful about mixing family and finances," Amber warned when I confided in her over coffee the next day. "Once those boundaries get blurred, it's hard to redraw them." I knew she was right, but what choice did I have? These were my parents. They had sacrificed so much for me growing up, working extra jobs to pay for my school trips, driving me to countless volleyball practices, supporting me through nursing school. How could I not help them when they needed it? Still, I decided to wait, to see if their situation improved. Maybe Dad would get his hours back. Maybe they could negotiate with the bank. Maybe there were assistance programs for Mom's medication. But a month later, things had only gotten worse. Dad's company had announced another round of layoffs scheduled for the following month. Their heating had been shut off due to unpaid bills. And when I visited, I noticed they were eating nothing but ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, the same diet I'd had during my broke student days. "We're fine, honey," Mom insisted when I pointed out the empty refrigerator. "We've just been busy and haven't had time to grocery shop." The final straw came when I received a panicked call from my mother one Tuesday evening after my 12-hour hospital shift. "They're going to evict us," she sobbed into the phone. "We got the formal notice today. We have 30 days to vacate." As I listened to my mother cry, an idea formed in my mind. A solution that would help my parents and that I could manage financially. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best option I could see. Little did I know that this decision, made from love and duty, would change everything. The solution seemed clear, if difficult. My parents needed a place to live that they could afford. I had an apartment with a reasonable mortgage payment, much less than their current housing costs. I could find a small rental apartment temporarily while they got back on their feet. The plan formed in my mind as I drove to their house the next day. I'd give them 6 months in my apartment. That would be enough time for Dad to find more stable employment and for them to save for a security deposit on a smaller place. I could tighten my budget and make it work. Before presenting the idea to my parents, I called Amber to talk it through. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Haley?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Your apartment is your sanctuary. And 6 months is a long time. What else can I do? Let them be homeless." I paced around my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. "They're my parents." "I understand that, but," she paused. "Just make sure you get everything in writing. Even with family. Especially with family. It's only temporary," I assured her. "They know that." When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, they were sitting at the kitchen table, shoulders slumped in defeat. Empty moving boxes were stacked in the corner, a stark reminder of their impending eviction. "I have a proposal," I said, sitting down across from them. "I want you to move into my apartment temporarily. 6 months should give you time to get back on your feet. I'll find a small place to rent." Mom's hand flew to her mouth. "Haley, no. We couldn't possibly." "That's far too much to ask," Dad interrupted, shaking his head vigorously. "You worked so hard for that place." "I know, but it makes financial sense," I explained. "My mortgage payment is half of what you're paying here. You can use the difference to pay down debts and save for your next place. It's just for 6 months. Where would you go?" Mom asked, her eyes filled with tears. "I've already looked at some studio apartments closer to the hospital," I lied, not wanting them to know I'd made this decision just hours ago. The commute would actually be shorter for me. After an hour of discussion, their initial reluctance gave way to tearful gratitude. We agreed they would move in at the beginning of the next month. 6 months. Just until they got back on their feet. I would draw up a simple agreement stating the timeline and expectations. "You're saving us, honey," Mom said, hugging me tightly. "We'll never forget this. We'll take such good care of your place," Dad promised, his voice thick with emotion. "And we'll be out before you know it. Back on our feet with a place of our own." The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of logistics. I found a small studio apartment across town, more expensive than my mortgage and half the size of my place, but available for immediate move-in. I packed up my belongings, deciding what to take to my temporary home and what could stay for my parents to use. Each item I packed brought a pang of sadness. The vintage coffee table I'd refinished myself. The comfortable reading chair positioned perfectly by the window. The kitchen I'd updated with new cabinet hardware and backsplash. I was leaving behind not just furniture, but a space I'd created for myself. "You're doing the right thing," I told my reflection in the bathroom mirror as I packed up my toiletries. "It's only 6 months." The day my parents moved in, we ordered pizza and ate it on the floor since their furniture wouldn't arrive until the following day. Mom kept wiping away tears, overwhelmed by the gesture. Dad kept squeezing my shoulder, unable to find adequate words to express his gratitude. "Here's the agreement I mentioned," I said, pulling out the simple contract I'd typed up. It outlined the 6-month timeline, stated that they would cover the utilities and maintain the apartment, and clarified that this was a temporary arrangement. "You don't need this, honey," Mom said, looking hurt. "We're family." "It's just to make sure we're all on the same page," I explained gently. Amber thought it would be a good idea to have everything in writing. Dad picked up a pen. "Your friend is smart. It's a good business practice, even among family. Maybe especially among family." He signed his name at the bottom, then slid the paper to Mom, who signed reluctantly. As I prepared to leave, Mom hugged me tightly. "We're going to make this right, Haley. I promise. This is just a blip, and soon everything will be back to normal." I handed them my keys, keeping one spare for emergencies, and took one last look around my apartment before closing the door. In the hallway, tears finally escaped, running down my cheeks as I wheeled my suitcase toward the elevator. The studio apartment felt alien that first night. The walls were an institutional beige, the carpet worn in places. Traffic noise filtered through the thin windows, and the neighbor's television blared through the wall until 2 in the morning. I lay on my unfamiliar bed, reminding myself that this discomfort was temporary. 6 months would pass quickly. I unpacked minimally, leaving most of my belongings in boxes stacked against the wall. Why bother making this place feel like home when it wasn't? This was just a way station, a brief detour before returning to my real home. That first week, my parents called daily with updates and repeated thanks. Mom sent photos of the potted herbs they'd moved to the balcony. Dad proudly reported fixing the squeaky bathroom door that I'd never gotten around to. "We're taking such good care of your home," Mom assured me. "It'll be waiting for you exactly as you left it." I believed them completely. After all, we had an agreement. And more importantly, we were family. I had no reason to doubt their word. The first month in my studio apartment was an adjustment, to put it mildly. The 45-minute commute to the hospital meant waking up at 5 instead of 6. The building's shared laundry facilities required hoarding quarters and planning my entire Sunday around securing a machine. And the financial strain of paying rent significantly higher than my mortgage made me scrutinize every purchase. "It's just temporary," became my daily mantra as I ate microwave dinners on my bed, which doubled as my couch in the cramped space. Initially, communication with my parents was constant. Mom texted photos of dinners they prepared in my beautiful kitchen. Dad called to ask which neighbor was the one I'd mentioned had a spare key in case of emergencies. They invited me over for Sunday dinners, and it felt strange being a guest in my own home. During those first few visits, everything seemed fine. The apartment was clean, if a bit more cluttered with my parents' belongings than when I lived there. Family photos I'd never displayed now adorned the walls. Dad's recliner dominated a corner of the living room that had previously held my desk. Small changes, but noticeable. "We hope you don't mind the little adjustments," Mom said, following my gaze to the rearranged furniture. We're trying to make it work for us without changing too much. Of course, I replied with a forced smile. Make yourselves comfortable. By the second month, the frequency of communication began to wane. Sunday dinners became every other week, then once a month. When I called to check in, the conversations grew shorter, often ending with, "We've got to run," or "We'll call you back later," though the return calls rarely came. One evening, I stopped by unannounced with some mail that had been delivered to my studio by mistake. When my mom opened the door, she seemed flustered. "Haley, we weren't expecting you." Behind her, I could see moving boxes in the living room, not packed up, but rather being unpacked. Brand new throw pillows adorned the couch. A large potted plant I'd never seen before stood in the corner. "Just dropping off some mail," I said, peering past her. "Are those new curtains?" "Oh yes," she said, accepting the envelopes from my hand. "The others let in too much light in the morning. Your father couldn't sleep." I wanted to point out that I'd chosen those curtains specifically for the morning light I loved, but bit my tongue. They were trying to make the space work for them. Temporarily. "How's the job search going for Dad?" I asked. "Oh, you know how it is in this market," she said vaguely. "He's got some prospects. We should know more soon." As I turned to leave, my sister Katie emerged from the bathroom. "Haley." "Surprise." She grinned, giving me a quick hug. "I didn't know you were stopping by." "I didn't know you were here," I replied, confused. Katie lived across town with roommates. "Just visiting," Mom interjected quickly. Katie came for dinner. But the overnight bag I glimpsed in the hallway suggested otherwise. The 3-month mark of our arrangement coincided with my parents canceling our planned dinner together. "Your father's not feeling well," Mom explained over the phone. "Let's reschedule for next week." Next week turned into next month. My texts about scheduling a time to discuss their progress toward finding their own place went unanswered for days, then received vague replies about "still working on it" and "the rental market is tough right now." During a rare dinner together at the apartment around the 4-month mark, I tried to broach the subject directly. "So, we're coming up on 4 months now," I said, attempting to keep my tone casual as I pushed pasta around my plate. "Have you started looking at places yet?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Dad cleared his throat. "We've seen a few," he said without meeting my eyes. "Nothing suitable yet. The rental prices are just outrageous," Mom added quickly. "For what they're asking, we might as well be paying our old mortgage. And most places want first and last month's rent plus security deposit," Dad continued. "We're still building our savings back up." I nodded, trying to be understanding. "I know it's tough. I'm just trying to plan, you know? We agreed on 6 months, and that's coming up faster than we think." "Are you in some rush to get us out?" Mom asked, her tone suddenly defensive. "No, of course not," I backpedaled, surprised by her reaction. "I just want to make sure we're all on the same page." "We know what we agreed to, Haley," Dad said firmly. "You don't need to worry." As I helped clear the dishes, I noticed Katie's jacket hanging by the door and her yoga mat in the corner. "Is Katie here again?" I asked. "She stays over sometimes when her roommate has company," Mom explained. "The walls in her apartment are paper thin. Poor thing." "That must be tough," I replied, wondering how often sometimes actually was. The next day at work, I couldn't focus. My patient charts took twice as long to complete, and I nearly administered the wrong dosage of medication before a colleague caught my error. "Everything okay, Haley?" Jordan, one of the other nurses, asked during our break. "You seem distracted." I hesitated, then found myself pouring out the whole situation: my apartment, my parents, the seemingly shifting timeline, and my growing concerns. "Family situations are tough," Jordan said sympathetically. "But it sounds like you need to set some firmer boundaries. Your generosity doesn't mean you gave up your rights to the apartment." "I know," I sighed. "I just don't want to seem ungrateful or selfish." "There's nothing selfish about expecting people to honor their commitments," she pointed out. "Even family." Jordan's words stayed with me for days. Was I being taken advantage of? Or was I overreacting to normal family dynamics during a difficult time? My unease grew when I received my mail and found a magazine addressed to Katie at my apartment address. Not my parents' temporary address, my address. As if she lived there. 5 months into our arrangement, My suspicions had grown into a gnawing certainty that something wasn't right. I decided to stop by the apartment unannounced on a Tuesday evening. When my mom opened the door, her surprise was evident. "Haley, we weren't expecting you." I was in the neighborhood, I lied, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The apartment had changed dramatically since my last visit. The bookshelves that once held my nursing textbooks now displayed Katie's crystal collection. The spare bedroom that had been my home office was now clearly Katie's bedroom, with her clothes spilling out of the closet and her distinctive bohemian decor covering the walls. "What's going on?" I asked, gesturing toward the transformed room. "Why does it look like Katie lives here?" Mom's face flushed. "She's been having some issues with her roommates. We said she could stay here for a little while." "How long is a little while?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "It's not permanent," Mom assured me, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Just until things settle down." "Does she know this is my apartment? That this is a temporary arrangement for you and Dad?" Before Mom could answer, the front door opened and Katie walked in, carrying grocery bags. "Hey Mom, I got that almond milk you." She stopped short when she saw me. "Oh. Hi, Haley." The tension in the room was palpable. I looked from Katie to my mother, waiting for an explanation that aligned with our original agreement. None came. "I think we need to talk about the timeline here," I said finally. "The 6 months we agreed to is almost up." "About that," Mom began hesitantly. "Your father and I were hoping we could discuss extending our stay. Just until we're more financially stable." "And how long will that be?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We can't put an exact date on it," she replied, wringing her hands. "These things take time." I left that evening with vague reassurances, but no concrete answers. The knot in my stomach had grown into a boulder. I called Amber as soon as I got back to my studio. "They've moved Katie in," I told her, pacing the small space. "And now they're talking about extending beyond our 6-month agreement." "I hate to say I told you so," Amber said gently, "but family and finances are a dangerous mix." "What do I do now?" I asked, fighting back tears of frustration. "You need to have a serious conversation with all of them. Remind them of the agreement they signed. Set a firm move-out date." I promised her I would, but first, I needed time to gather my thoughts and prepare for what would likely be a difficult confrontation. The next day, my supervisor Nancy noticed my distraction during our staff meeting. "Everything okay, Haley?" she asked after pulling me aside. I gave her the condensed version of my situation. "Family dynamics are complicated," she said thoughtfully. "But remember, helping others shouldn't mean harming yourself. You matter too." Her words resonated deeply. In my effort to help my parents, I'd allowed my own needs and boundaries to be disregarded. The 6-month mark of our arrangement was approaching, and it was time for a serious conversation about their plans to move out. I decided to wait until the weekend to have this discussion. I wanted to be calm and prepared. I spent the week rehearsing what I would say, determined to be firm but compassionate. But the evening before our planned discussion, everything changed. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw it, Katie's post that stopped me cold. There was my sister, standing in my living room, surrounded by moving boxes. The caption read, "Many thanks to my parents for letting me move into their beautiful apartment. Home sweet home. #blessed #new beginnings." The comments section was worse. Friends congratulating her on her new place. My mother responding with heart emojis. My father commenting, "We're so happy you love your new home, sweetie." My hands shook as I zoomed in on the photos. Katie's clothing filled the closet I had built extra shelves for. Her meditation cushion sat in the corner where my reading chair had been. The apartment, my apartment, had been completely transformed. This wasn't a temporary arrangement anymore. They had given my home to my sister. And from the looks of it, none of them planned on leaving anytime soon. I stared at Katie's Instagram post until my eyes burned, scrolling through the comments in disbelief. Friends and family were congratulating her as if this had been the plan all along. As if my apartment had magically become hers through some legitimate means. "So happy for you, Katie. The place looks amazing." "Wow, great apartment." "When's the housewarming party?" "Your parents are the best." "So generous." Each comment felt like a knife twisting deeper. No mention of me, of my sacrifice, of the fact that this was supposed to be temporary. Had everyone conveniently forgotten that this was my apartment? That I owned it? Then I saw my cousin Melissa's comment. I thought this was Haley's place? Katie's reply made my stomach drop. My parents have been living here for months. They decided I needed the stability more than Haley does since she can afford rent on her own. Family helps family. I called my parents immediately, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The call went straight to voicemail. I texted, "We need to talk now about Katie's Instagram post." No response. Sleep was impossible that night. I tossed and turned in my tiny studio, replaying every conversation, every interaction from the past 6 months. Had this been their plan all along? To move in temporarily with no intention of leaving? To gradually move Katie in and claim my space as their own to give away? By morning, my shock had hardened into resolve. I called in sick to work for the first time in years and drove to my apartment, because it was still my apartment, regardless of who was currently living there. I pressed the buzzer repeatedly until someone finally answered. "Who is it?" Katie's voice crackled through the intercom. "It's Haley." "Open the door." A long pause. "Now's not really a good time." "Open the door, Katie, or I'm using my key." Another pause, then the buzz of the door unlocking. I took the stairs 2 at a time, too agitated to wait for the elevator. When I reached my apartment, Katie opened the door just enough to peek out, still in her pajamas despite it being almost noon. "Hey, Haley," she said cautiously. "What's up?" "What's up?" I repeated incredulously, pushing the door open wider and stepping inside. "Are you serious right now?" My parents appeared from the kitchen, both looking uncomfortable but not particularly surprised to see me. "Haley," my father started, "we were going to call you today." "To tell me what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "That you've given my apartment to Katie? That the temporary arrangement we agreed to, that you signed a paper agreeing to, was actually permanent in your minds." "Let's all calm down," my mother said, gesturing toward the couch. "We can discuss this rationally." "I saw Katie's Instagram post," I continued, ignoring her suggestion to sit. "Many thanks to my parents for letting me move into their beautiful apartment." I mimicked Katie's voice. "Their apartment? This is my apartment. I own it. I pay the mortgage." "Technically, you're not paying the mortgage right now," Katie pointed out. "Mom and Dad are." I stared at her, speechless for a moment. "Because I'm paying rent on a studio apartment I never wanted. Because I was helping them through a tough time. And we appreciate that," Dad said, his tone placating. "But your sister needs a stable living situation too. You're established in your career. You can afford rent." "So this was the plan all along?" I asked, looking from one face to another. "Move in temporarily, then just never leave? Give my place to Katie without even discussing it with me?" "It wasn't planned," Mom insisted. "It just evolved this way." Katie's roommate situation became unbearable. She needed a place to stay. "And what about me?" I demanded. "What about what I need?" "I gave up my home to help you, and this is how you repay me." "You're being a bit dramatic," Katie said with an eye roll. "It's just an apartment." "Just an apartment?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "I worked double shifts for 7 years to save for the down payment. I renovated this place myself. This is my home." "You can make a new home," Katie said dismissively. "You've got a good job." "I'm a yoga instructor. I can barely make rent on a shared apartment." "That's your choice." I exploded. "You chose your career path. You chose to prioritize finding yourself over stability. Why should I have to give up what I worked for because of your choices?" "Because we're family," Mom interjected. "Family helps family." "Family doesn't take advantage of family," I countered. "Family doesn't lie and manipulate." "Nobody lied," Dad said firmly. "Plans changed. Circumstances changed. And you didn't think I deserved to be part of that conversation?" I asked, fighting back tears. "You didn't think I deserved the courtesy of being asked before you gave away my apartment?" "We knew you wouldn't understand," Katie said. "You've always been the perfect daughter with the perfect job and the perfect life. You have no idea what it's like to struggle." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I worked 3 jobs through nursing school. I lived with 4 roommates in a 2-bedroom apartment to save money. I ate ramen for dinner 5 nights a week for years. Don't you dare tell me I don't know what it's like to struggle. That was your choice, Katie shot back. You could have asked Mom and Dad for help. Like you do. I asked. Constantly. Girls, please, Mom interjected. This isn't productive. I took a deep breath, trying to regain control of my emotions. Here's what's going to happen. You have 30 days to find another living arrangement. All of you. I want my apartment back. The three of them exchanged glances. Honey, Mom began gently, we can't just leave. We don't have anywhere to go. That's not my problem anymore, I said, surprised at my own firmness. You had 6 months to figure it out. You chose not to. You're seriously going to evict your own family? Katie asked incredulously. I'm seriously going to reclaim what's legally mine, I corrected her. What you took without asking. We didn't take anything, Dad protested. You offered. I offered a temporary arrangement to help you through a crisis. Not a permanent solution. Not a free apartment for Katie. You're being selfish, Katie said, crossing her arms. You know I can't afford a place like this on my own. Neither could I at first, I replied. That's why I worked hard and saved money. That's how the real world works, Katie. So that's it? Mom asked, tears filling her eyes. You're just throwing us out? The guilt trip might have worked 6 months ago, but not anymore. I'm giving you 30 days notice, which is more than you gave me when you decided to give away my apartment without my knowledge or consent. And if we refuse to leave? Dad asked, his jaw set stubbornly. I hadn't expected this level of resistance. I'd thought, naively, perhaps, that once confronted, they would acknowledge their wrong and make plans to move. That they would apologize for overstepping. That they would act like the parents who had raised me to be honest and respectful. If you refuse to leave, I said slowly, then I'll have to take legal action. I don't want to, but I will. You would see your own parents? Mom gasped. You would steal your daughter's apartment? I countered. Katie scoffed. Always so dramatic, Haley. This is why nobody told you what was happening. We knew you'd overreact. Expecting people to honor their agreements isn't overreacting, I said. Expecting to be treated with basic respect isn't overreacting. Family is supposed to share, Katie insisted. I did share. For 6 months. That time is up. I turned to leave, unable to stand being in the apartment, my apartment, that no longer felt like mine. At the door, I paused and looked back at my family, these people I barely recognized anymore. 30 days, I repeated. Find somewhere else to live. As I closed the door behind me, I heard Katie's parting shot. Congratulations on being the perfect daughter who puts property over family. I made it to my car before the tears came, hot and fast, blurring my vision as I gripped the steering wheel. The betrayal cut deep, not just because they had taken my apartment, but because they saw nothing wrong with it. In their minds, I was the villain for wanting back what was rightfully mine. For the first time in my life, I wondered if the family I had sacrificed so much for was worth the price I had paid. The day after my confrontation with my family, I received a barrage of texts from extended relatives. Aunt Carol expressing her disappointment in my heartless behavior. Uncle Mike suggesting I think about what family really means. Cousin Jim reminding me that blood is thicker than water. It seemed my parents and Katie had wasted no time spreading their version of events, a narrative that cast me as the villain who wanted to make her family homeless out of selfishness. They're making me sound like some kind of monster, I told Amber over coffee. Like I'm throwing poor, helpless people onto the street for no reason. Did you expect them to tell the truth? Amber asked, stirring her latte. That would mean admitting they took advantage of you. I shook my head, still struggling to process how quickly everything had unraveled. I keep asking myself if I'm overreacting. Am I being unreasonable? Haley, Amber said firmly, they took your home and gave it to your sister without your permission. Then they tried to make you feel guilty for being upset about it. That's not normal family behavior. That's manipulation. Her words validated what I already knew deep down, but hearing them aloud helped solidify my resolve. This wasn't about being ungenerous or putting property over people. This was about standing up for myself after being deceived by the people I trusted most. That evening, I received a call from my father. We need to talk about this situation, he said, his tone businesslike. Your mother is very upset. I'm very upset too, Dad, I replied. You gave away my apartment without even asking me. We didn't give it away, he corrected. We're allowing Katie to live here with us. There's a difference. Not according to her Instagram post, I pointed out. Or the comments you and Mom left congratulating her on her new home. He sighed heavily. Social media isn't real life, Haley. Katie was just excited about having a stable living situation for once. At my expense. We've been paying the mortgage and utilities, he countered. It's hardly at your expense. I'm paying rent on a studio apartment I never wanted. I exclaimed, frustration building again. I gave up my home to help you and Mom through what I thought was a temporary crisis. Not so you could move my sister in permanently. Your sister needs help too. Then help her in a way that doesn't involve taking something that belongs to me, I said. Help her the way normal parents do, without stealing from their other child. No one stole anything, he insisted, his voice hardening. And I don't appreciate the accusation. What would you call it then? I challenged. Moving into someone's home under false pretenses, gradually moving someone else in, and then refusing to leave when confronted? I'd call it family helping family during difficult times, he replied. Something you seem to have forgotten about. His attempt to turn this around on me ignited a fresh wave of anger. I forgot about helping family? I gave up my home for 6 months. I'm living in a studio half the size of my apartment and paying twice as much. How is that forgetting about family? Haley, listen. No, you listen, I interrupted, surprising myself with my boldness. I have been more than generous. I have been patient. I have put my life on hold to help you and Mom. And in return, you've lied to me, taken advantage of me, and now you're trying to make me feel guilty for wanting back what's legally mine. That stops now. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. What are you saying? He finally asked. I'm saying you have 30 days to find another place to live. All of you. If you're not out by then, I'll be forced to take legal action. I don't want to do that, but I will if necessary. You'd really evict your own family? The disbelief in his voice was evident. You really gave away your daughter's apartment without asking? I countered. After we hung up, I felt simultaneously empowered and terrified. I had never stood up to my father like that before. Growing up, he had been the authority figure whose word was law. Challenging him directly went against decades of family dynamics. But I was no longer the compliant daughter seeking approval. I was a grown woman protecting what was rightfully hers. The next week passed in tense silence. My texts went unanswered. My calls went to voicemail. When I drove by the apartment building, my parents' car was there, confirming they hadn't miraculously seen the light and moved out early. 8 days after our confrontation, I received a text from my mother asking me to meet them for dinner to discuss a compromise. Hope flickered briefly, perhaps they had come to their senses. We met at a neutral location, a restaurant halfway between my studio and my apartment. My parents arrived first, seated in a corner booth. Katie, I noticed, was conspicuously absent. Where's Katie? I asked after reluctantly accepting my mother's hug. She had a yoga class to teach, Mom explained. Besides, we thought it might be better if it was just us three first. After ordering drinks, Dad cleared his throat. We've been talking, and we understand your position better now. My eyebrows raised in surprise. You do? Yes, Mom nodded. We should have discussed Katie moving in with you directly. That was our mistake. The admission, while falling short of a full apology, was more than I'd expected. Thank you for acknowledging that, I said cautiously. We'd like to propose a solution, Dad continued. One that works for everyone. I waited, hopeful despite my better judgment. We'd like to buy the apartment from you, he said. We've looked at our finances, and with some help from your Aunt Carol, we can offer you the price you paid for it 3 years ago. My jaw dropped. The price I paid 3 years ago? Before I renovated it? Before property values in that neighborhood increased by 15%. It's a fair offer, Dad insisted. You'd get back your initial investment. And lose thousands in equity, I pointed out. Not to mention all the work I put into improving the place. We thought you'd be happy with this compromise, Mom said, looking genuinely confused. You get your money back, and we get to stay in the apartment. Katie gets stability. Everyone wins. Except me, I said. I lose my home, I lose the equity I've built, and I lose the improvements I made. How exactly am I winning in this scenario? You'd be helping your family, Dad said, as if that should be compensation enough. I've been helping my family for 6 months, I replied. All I've gotten in return is betrayal and manipulation. That's not fair, Haley, Mom protested. No, what's not fair is what you're doing to me, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. What's not fair is moving my sister into my apartment without my knowledge or consent. What's not fair is trying to buy my property at below market value and acting like you're doing me a favor. Lower your voice, Dad hissed, glancing around the restaurant. People are staring. I don't care, I said, though I did lower my volume slightly. I'm done being manipulated by you. I'm done being the only one expected to sacrifice in this family. That's not true, isn't it? When has Katie ever been asked to sacrifice anything? When have you and Mom ever prioritized my needs over hers? They exchanged uncomfortable glances, but offered no rebuttal. I'm not selling my apartment, I said firmly. Especially not at a loss. You still have 22 days to find another place to live. I suggest you start looking. And if we don't? Dad asked, his jaw set stubbornly. Then I'll file for formal eviction, I replied, surprised at how steady my voice remained despite the churning in my stomach. And our relationship may never recover from that. You'd choose an apartment over your relationship with your family? Mom asked, tears welling in her eyes. I'm not the one making that choice, I said quietly. You are. By refusing to respect my boundaries and my property rights, you're the ones damaging our relationship. I stood up, no longer hungry. 22 days. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. As I walked away, I heard my father mutter, she always was stubborn. Just like her grandmother. It wasn't stubbornness driving me, it was self-respect. Something I was only now realizing had been in short supply in my relationship with my family for a very long time. The next morning, I awoke to a group text from Katie to the extended family. Update on the apartment situation. Haley is refusing our generous offer to buy her apartment. Now threatening to evict her own parents and sister in the middle of winter. Please talk some sense into her. My phone immediately began buzzing with messages from aunts, uncles, and cousins, all expressing varying degrees of shock and disappointment in my behavior. How could you do this to your own parents? Family should come before property. I always thought you were the sensible one, Haley. The onslaught was overwhelming. I turned off my phone and went to work, unable to deal with the barrage of guilt and manipulation. During my lunch break, I received an unexpected visit from my childhood friend Tyler, who worked at a nearby hospital. I saw Katie's post, he said, sitting across from me in the cafeteria. Seemed pretty one-sided, so I thought I'd check in. I gave him the condensed version of events, bracing myself for more judgment. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like they're taking advantage of your generosity. And now they're trying to make you the bad guy for standing up for yourself. His understanding brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Everyone else seems to think I'm being selfish. Everyone else isn't living in a tiny studio while their sister moves into their apartment, he pointed out. Besides, your parents raised you to be responsible and independent. Seems weird they'd punish you for being exactly that. Thank you, I said, grateful for his perspective. It helps to know I'm not crazy for feeling this way. You're not crazy, he assured me. But you might need some backup dealing with all this. Have you thought about getting legal advice? I hadn't, still hoping my family would come to their senses without forcing me to take that step. But as days passed with no movement toward a resolution, I realized Tyler was right. I needed professional guidance. The next day, I consulted with an attorney named Melissa who specialized in property law. Legally, the situation is straightforward, she explained after hearing my story. You own the property. They have no lease. You've given them notice to vacate. If they don't leave, we can file for eviction. And morally? I couldn't help asking. She smiled sympathetically. I'm not an ethics professor, but from where I sit, you've been more than generous. You gave them 6 months in your home. You're giving them 30 days notice now, which is more than legally required. You've tried to negotiate in good faith. They're the ones refusing to honor their commitments. Hearing it laid out so clearly helped solidify my resolve. I wasn't the villain in the story, despite my family's attempts to cast me as one. With Melissa's help, I drafted a formal eviction notice and had it delivered to the apartment the next day. The legal language was clear and unambiguous. They had to vacate the premises by the specified date or face legal consequences. That evening, my Aunt Carol called, her voice tight with disapproval. "A legal notice, Haley? Really? Is that how we handle family matters now?" "It became necessary when they refused to honor our original agreement," I explained, trying to remain calm. "Your parents raised you better than this," she chided. "After all they've done for you." "What exactly have they done for me lately, Aunt Carol?" I interrupted. "Besides take my apartment, move my sister in without my permission, and then try to buy it from me at below market value? They're your parents," she said, as if that explained and excused everything. "Yes, they are," I agreed. "Which is why I expected better from them." The conversation ended with neither of us changing our positions. But something had shifted inside me. The guilt that had plagued me for days was fading, replaced by a growing certainty that I was doing the right thing, not just legally, but morally. The final confrontation came 3 days before the eviction deadline. I agreed to meet my entire family, parents, Katie, and even Aunt Carol, at a neutral location to try one last time to resolve the situation amicably. At Tyler's suggestion, I brought a neutral third party, my hospital's staff mediator, who had volunteered her services when she heard about my situation. We gathered around a conference table at a community center, tension thick in the air. "I'm Janet," the mediator introduced herself. "I'm here to help facilitate a conversation, not to take sides. Can we all agree to listen respectfully and speak honestly?" Everyone nodded, though Katie's eye roll suggested her commitment was superficial at best. "Haley, would you like to start by explaining your position?" Janet prompted. I took a deep breath. 6 months ago, I offered my apartment to my parents as a temporary solution to their housing crisis. We agreed it would be for 6 months, and they signed a document confirming that understanding. Now it's been 6 months, and not only are they refusing to leave, but they've moved my sister in and are treating the apartment as if it belongs to them. All I want is for our original agreement to be honored. "Tom and Linda, your response?" Janet asked my parents. Dad cleared his throat. "We acknowledge we agreed to 6 months initially. But circumstances changed. Katie needed a stable living situation, and the apartment has enough space for the 3 of us. We offered to buy it from Haley, but she refused." "At below market value," I interjected. Janet nodded. "Katie, would you like to add anything?" Katie leaned forward. "I think Haley is being incredibly selfish. She has a good job and can afford to rent or buy another place. I'm just starting out in my career and can't afford anything in this market. Family is supposed to help each other." "And I did help," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I gave up my home for 6 months to help Mom and Dad. That doesn't mean I gave it up permanently." "But why do you need it back so badly?" Mom asked. "What's so special about this specific apartment?" "It's mine," I said simply. "I worked for it. I saved for it. I renovated it. It's my home." "Homes can be replaced," Aunt Carol commented from the side. "So can roommates," I replied, looking at Katie. "You could find a new living situation instead of taking mine." The conversation continued in circles, with my family consistently returning to the theme that I was being selfish for wanting my own property back, while I maintained that they were the ones overstepping boundaries. Finally, Janet asked the key question: "Is there any compromise solution where everyone gets some of what they need?" A heavy silence fell over the room. I had already compromised by giving them 6 months in my home and then offering 30 days to find new accommodations. What more could I reasonably be expected to give? "I've already offered more than I should have had to," I said finally. "I gave 6 months. I gave notice. I've been patient. At this point, the only acceptable outcome is for all of you to move out by the deadline." "Then I guess we're done here," Dad said, standing up. "If Haley won't budge, neither will we." "What does that mean?" I asked, alarmed. "It means we're not going anywhere," Katie declared defiantly. "You'll have to drag us out." "If that's your decision, then yes, legal action will proceed," I said, my heart breaking even as I stood my ground. "I don't want it to come to that," but I will not be manipulated or taken advantage of anymore, even by family. As they filed out, my mother paused at the door. For a moment, I thought she might offer some conciliatory words, some acknowledgement of how they had hurt me. Instead, she simply said, "I never thought you'd choose an apartment over your family, Haley. I raised you better than that." The door closed behind her, leaving me alone with Janet. "For what it's worth," the mediator said quietly, "you're not choosing an apartment over family. You're choosing self-respect over manipulation. There's a difference." Her words stayed with me as I drove back to my studio, the weight of the impending legal battle heavy on my shoulders. But beneath the sadness and anxiety, a small spark of pride was growing. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was standing firm in my own worth, refusing to be the family doormat any longer. Whatever happened next, I would face it with the knowledge that I had tried every reasonable approach to resolve this situation. The rest was up to them. The deadline came and went. My parents and Katie remained in my apartment, forcing me to proceed with the formal eviction process. On my attorney Melissa's advice, I filed the necessary paperwork with the court and prepared for what would likely be a messy legal battle. In most cases like this, once they receive the court summons, they realize you're serious and decide to move out before the hearing, Melissa explained as we reviewed the documents in her office. People rarely want to face a judge when they're clearly in the wrong. "You don't know my family," I replied grimly. "Especially Katie. She can be incredibly stubborn when she thinks she's right. Even the most stubborn people usually back down when confronted with legal consequences," Melissa assured me. "The important thing now is to limit communication except through me. No emotional texts, no phone calls. Everything needs to go through proper channels." Following her advice was harder than I anticipated. The barrage of messages from family members continued relentlessly. Aunt Carol called daily, alternating between guilt trips and angry tirades. Uncle Mike sent lengthy emails explaining my moral obligation to family. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had strong opinions about my character. Worse were the messages from my parents, particularly my mother's texts that oscillated between martyrdom, "I guess all those years of sacrificing for you meant nothing," and nostalgia, "Remember when you were little and I nursed you through pneumonia? I never left your side for 3 days." Each message was designed to hit me where I was most vulnerable, my love for my family and my fear of losing them. Each one had to be left unanswered, per Melissa's instructions, which only increased my sense of isolation. One unexpected source of support came from my childhood friend Tyler, who started dropping by my studio with takeout food and a sympathetic ear. "Your parents probably think they're doing the right thing," he observed one evening as we shared Chinese food. "They see Katie struggling and want to help her. The problem is they're helping her at your expense, and they've convinced themselves that's okay because you're the responsible one who can handle it." "Being responsible shouldn't be punished," I said, poking at my lo mein without much appetite. "It shouldn't," he agreed. "But family dynamics are weird. Sometimes we get locked into roles from childhood that don't make sense anymore." Tyler's insights helped me understand the situation from a different perspective. It didn't excuse my family's behavior, but it helped explain it. I had always been the achiever, the one who had everything together. Katie had been the free spirit who needed protection and support. Those dynamics had worked when we were children, but they had become toxic in adulthood. The stress began taking a physical toll. I lost weight. Dark circles appeared under my eyes. I found myself making small errors at work, nothing dangerous, but uncharacteristic for someone usually so detail-oriented. "You should talk to someone," my supervisor Nancy suggested after noticing me zone out during a staff meeting. "The hospital has resources. Therapists who understand family conflict." Initially, I resisted the idea. Therapy felt like an admission that I couldn't handle my problems on my own. But as the legal process dragged on and my sleep deteriorated further, I realized I needed professional support. Dr. Reynolds, the therapist I began seeing weekly, helped me navigate the complex emotions surrounding the family conflict. "You're grieving," she observed during our second session. "Not just the potential loss of your apartment, but the loss of the family relationship you thought you had." "I never imagined they could do something like this," I admitted. I always thought we were close, that we respected each other. Family relationships often operate on unspoken expectations and assumptions, she explained. When those are violated, it can be profoundly disorienting. Through our sessions, I began to recognize patterns in my family dynamics that had contributed to the current situation. How I had always been expected to be the responsible one, the peacemaker, the one who sacrificed for others. How Katie had been permitted, even encouraged, to prioritize her own needs and desires. How my parents had enabled her dependence while expecting independence from me. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, Dr. Reynolds reminded me repeatedly. It's necessary for healthy relationships. 3 weeks after filing the eviction paperwork, my father reached out through an unexpected channel. He called Amber, asking her to arrange a meeting with me. He says they want to discuss a new compromise, Amber reported after the awkward conversation. Something about buying you out at market value now. I consulted with Melissa before agreeing to the meeting. I'll go with you, she offered, to keep things focused on the legal aspects and prevent emotional manipulation. We met at Melissa's office, neutral territory with the added benefit of professional surroundings. My parents arrived alone. Katie was conspicuously absent. Thank you for agreeing to meet, my father began, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. We've been doing a lot of thinking. We want to resolve this without going to court, my mother added, her hands fidgeting nervously with her purse strap. I'm listening, I said, careful to keep my tone neutral. We're prepared to buy the apartment from you at full market value, Dad explained. We've secured financing through Aunt Carol and Uncle Mike. A fair transaction that gives you what the apartment is worth and allows us to stay. I glanced at Melissa, who nodded slightly, indicating this was at least a legitimate offer worth considering. Why the change of heart? I asked. A few weeks ago, you were offering me the price I paid 3 years ago. My parents exchanged glances. We've spoken with a lawyer of our own, Dad admitted. He made it clear that legally, we don't have a strong position. The apartment is yours, and the court will almost certainly order eviction. So this isn't about recognizing that what you did was wrong, I clarified. It's about avoiding losing in court. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone, Mom insisted. You get fair market value for your property. We get to stay in a place that works for us. Katie gets stability. And what do I lose? I asked. My home. The place I worked years to afford. The renovations I did myself. The neighbors I've built relationships with. You can buy another place, Dad pointed out. With the money from the sale. In this market? Unlikely, I said. At least not anything comparable to what I have now. So, what do you want, Haley? Mom asked, frustration evident in her voice. We're trying to be reasonable here. I want what I've wanted from the beginning, I replied. I want my apartment back. I want the agreement we made 6 months ago to be honored. I want my family to respect my boundaries and my property rights. And if we buy the apartment, it wouldn't be your property anymore, Dad argued. It would be ours, fair and square. I shook my head. It's not about the legal ownership at this point. It's about the fact that you took something that mattered deeply to me and gave it to Katie without my consent. You betrayed my trust. Buying the apartment now doesn't undo that betrayal. So you're refusing our offer? Dad asked, his expression hardening. I'm declining to sell, I corrected him. As is my right as the property owner. The meeting ended shortly after, with no resolution reached. As they left, my mother turned back, tears in her eyes. We're still your parents, Haley. We still love you. Can you find it in your heart to compromise? I did compromise, I reminded her gently. For 6 months. Now I'm simply asking for what's rightfully mine. The eviction hearing was scheduled for the following week. I spent the intervening days in a state of constant anxiety, torn between standing my ground and the fear of permanently damaging my relationship with my family. The night before the hearing, I received a text from Katie, the first direct communication from her in weeks. I hope you're happy. Mom cried herself to sleep tonight because of you. I didn't respond, though my finger hovered over the keyboard for several minutes. There was nothing I could say that would make her understand my perspective if she hadn't already. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit and met Melissa at the courthouse. My stomach was in knots as we waited in the hallway for our case to be called. "They're not here yet," I observed, checking my watch. We were 20 minutes early, but I had expected my family to arrive promptly, given the stakes. "Let's wait inside," Melissa suggested, guiding me toward the courtroom. As we approached the doors, I heard my name called. Turning, I saw my father hurrying down the hallway alone. "Haley, wait," he called, slightly out of breath. "We need to talk." Melissa stepped forward protectively. "Any communication should go through me at this point, Mr. Matthews." "Please," he said, addressing me directly. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I hesitated, then nodded to Melissa. "It's okay. I'll hear him out." We moved to a quiet corner of the hallway, Melissa staying within eyesight but giving us enough space for privacy. "Where are Mom and Katie?" I asked. "At the apartment," he replied. "Packing." I blinked in surprise. "Packing?" He nodded, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen him. "We're moving out. Today." Katie found a 2-bedroom apartment she can share with a coworker. "Your mother and I are staying with Aunt Carol until we find something permanent." "Why the sudden change?" I asked, suspicious of this 11th-hour capitulation. "Because your mother and I realized what we were about to lose," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "Not just in court today, but in the bigger picture. We were about to lose our relationship with our daughter. And no apartment, no matter how convenient or affordable, is worth that." I stood speechless, absorbing his words. "I'm not saying we handled things perfectly," he continued. "We should have been more upfront about the situation with Katie. We should have discussed extending our stay instead of just assuming it would be okay. We were wrong about that." It wasn't a full admission of wrongdoing, but it was more acknowledgement than I'd received throughout this entire ordeal. "What about Katie?" I asked. "Is she on board with this?" Dad sighed heavily. "Katie is. Katie. She's angry. She thinks we're choosing you over her. It's going to take some time for her to understand that this isn't about taking sides, it's about doing what's right." "And what changed your mind about what's right?" I couldn't help asking. "Talking to your old pediatrician, Dr. Morris, at church last Sunday," he admitted. I was telling him about the situation, my version of it, anyway, expecting sympathy. Instead, he asked me what I would have done if someone had taken something that belonged to Katie without her permission. The question stopped me cold. I nodded, understanding dawning. Sometimes it took an outside perspective to break through entrenched thinking. "So what happens now?" I asked. "We'll be out by the end of the day," he promised. "The place needs some cleaning and minor repairs. Katie wasn't exactly careful with things. We'll take care of all that. And then..." He paused, "And then we hope you'll be willing to work on rebuilding our relationship, even if it takes time." The hearing was canceled, the eviction paperwork withdrawn. By that evening, I had received confirmation from the building manager that my parents had turned in their keys and vacated the apartment. According to his report, they had left it broom clean, with only minor damage to one wall where Katie had apparently hung a large macrame art piece without proper anchors. I waited a week before visiting the apartment, needing time to process all that had happened. When I finally unlocked the door and stepped inside, the space felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. The layout was the same, but subtle changes were everywhere: marks on the walls, different furniture arrangement, lingering sense of unfamiliar candles. Standing in the middle of the living room, I experienced a strange emptiness. I had one, my apartment was mine again. Yet the victory felt hollow, tainted by the knowledge of what it had cost in terms of family relationships. That night, I called Dr. Reynolds to schedule an extra session. "I got what I wanted," I told her, sitting in her office the next day. "So why don't I feel better?" "Because relationships matter to you," she replied simply. "And right now, those relationships are damaged. That's a real loss, even if you were in the right about the apartment." "So what do I do now?" I asked. "Pretend it never happened? Go back to Sunday dinners and act like everything's normal?" "Not at all," she said. "What happened was real, and pretending otherwise won't help anyone. The question is, what kind of relationship do you want with your family moving forward? And what boundaries need to be in place for that relationship to be healthy?" It was a question I would spend the next several months exploring, both in therapy and in cautious, gradual reconnection with my family. Moving back into my apartment was a bittersweet experience. While I felt vindicated in reclaiming what was rightfully mine, the space held complicated memories now. Each room reminded me not only of the home I had created, but also of the family conflict that had nearly torn us apart. The first order of business was reclaiming the space physically. I changed the locks immediately, not out of lingering distrust, but as a symbolic gesture of establishing boundaries. I repainted walls, rearranged furniture, and replaced items that had been damaged or removed during my family's stay. It's like a cleansing ritual, Amber observed as she helped me hang new curtains in the living room. You're washing away the negative energy. Is that too dramatic? I asked, standing back to assess our work. After what you've been through? Not at all, she assured me. This is your home. You get to reclaim it however feels right to you. Physical restoration was the easy part. Emotional healing proved far more challenging. For the first month after moving back in, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Brief text messages were the extent of our communication. I needed space to process my feelings without the pressure of forced reconciliation. Dr. Reynolds continued to be an invaluable guide during this period. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing what happened, she reminded me during one session. It means choosing not to let the hurt control your future. And it happens on your timeline, not anyone else's. What about Katie? I asked. She hasn't apologized or even acknowledged she did anything wrong. You can't control how others respond, Dr. Reynolds said gently. You can only control your own actions and boundaries. Katie may never see this situation from your perspective. The question is, can you accept that and still have some kind of relationship with her, or is her acknowledgement a necessary condition for moving forward? It was a question I wrestled with for weeks. Katie had always been the family favorite, the one who got away with behavior that would never have been tolerated from me. Part of me wanted to demand the accountability she had evaded her entire life. Another part recognized that such a demand might permanently sever our already fragile connection. 6 weeks after reclaiming my apartment, I received an unexpected text from my father. Your mother and I are starting family counseling next week. The therapist suggested it might be helpful if you joined us for a session when you feel ready. No pressure, just an open invitation. The message surprised me. My parents had always been of the generation that viewed therapy with suspicion, something for people with real problems, not ordinary family disagreements. I discussed the invitation with Dr. Reynolds in our next session. It's a positive sign, she noted. They're acknowledging there are issues that need professional help to address. That's significant progress. What if it's just another manipulation? I asked, my skepticism honed by recent experience. A way to make me feel guilty or pressure me into forgetting what happened? That's possible, she acknowledged. But it's also possible they're genuinely trying to understand where things went wrong. Either way, you can maintain your boundaries while still being open to the process. After careful consideration, I agreed to attend a session, with the understanding that I could leave at any point if it became unproductive or manipulative. The family counseling office was in a converted Victorian house, with comfortable furniture and soft lighting designed to put clients at ease. My parents were already seated when I arrived, both looking nervous but determined. Thank you for coming, Haley, the therapist, Dr. Patel, greeted me warmly. Your parents have shared their perspective on recent events, but I'd like to hear yours as well, if you're comfortable sharing. For the next hour, I spoke more honestly about my feelings than I ever had with my parents. I described the hurt of discovering they had given my apartment to Katie without my consent. The betrayal of trust when they refused to honor our agreement. The frustration of being cast as the villain for wanting back what was rightfully mine. To my surprise, my parents listened without interrupting, without defending themselves. When it was their turn to speak, my father went first. I've been doing a lot of thinking about why we handled things the way we did, he said, looking directly at me. And I've realized we've always had different expectations for you and Katie. We expected you to be responsible, to handle things on your own, to make sacrifices when necessary. With Katie, we expected her to need help, to struggle, to require accommodation. That wasn't fair to either of you, my mother added softly. We set you up in opposition to each other instead of supporting you both equally. Their insight stunned me. It was exactly what Tyler had observed weeks earlier, but hearing it from my parents themselves made it real in a way it hadn't been before. We're not asking for forgiveness yet, Dad continued. We know we need to earn that. But we are asking for a chance to rebuild our relationship on better terms. It was the beginning of a long, sometimes painful process of family reconstruction. We continued the counseling sessions weekly, gradually establishing new patterns of communication and respect. Katie joined occasionally, though her participation was sporadic and often defensive. She's not ready to acknowledge her role in what happened, Mom explained after one particularly tense session where Katie had stormed out. But she's watching how we're changing, even if she won't admit it. 3 months after moving back into my apartment, I invited my parents over for dinner, the first time they had returned to the space since moving out. The evening was awkward at times, but ultimately productive. We could acknowledge the elephant in the room, the apartment itself, without letting it dominate our interaction. You've made some nice changes, Mom observed, noticing the new paint color and rearranged furniture. It needed some updating, I replied, choosing not to mention that the updates were partly to erase the reminders of their unauthorized residency. Small steps led to larger ones. Sunday dinners resumed, though now hosted at my parents' new apartment rather than mine. They had found a modest 2-bedroom place that fit their budget, in a neighborhood not far from where they had lived before. Each gathering felt a little less strained than the last, as we cautiously rebuilt the trust that had been damaged. My relationship with Katie remained the most challenging to repair. She maintained her position that I had been selfish and unreasonable, though she expressed this view less frequently and vehemently as time passed. When we did interact, it was with a polite distance that was worlds away from the closeness we had once shared as sisters. Give her time, Tyler advised when I expressed frustration about the situation. She's having to rethink her place in the family dynamic too. That's not easy. Tyler had become an unexpected constant in my life throughout this ordeal. His practical perspective and unwavering support had been a lifeline during the darkest moments. As the dust settled, our friendship had evolved into something deeper, though neither of us had put a label on it yet. 6 months after reclaiming my apartment, I received a promotion at the hospital, advancement to charge nurse on the pediatric floor. The increased responsibility came with a significant salary bump, allowing me to finally address the financial setback caused by those months of paying rent instead of my mortgage. You deserve this, Nancy told me as she delivered the news. Your work has been exemplary despite everything you've been going through personally. That shows real professionalism and dedication. I hosted a small celebration at my apartment, inviting Amber, Tyler, and a few close colleagues. After some deliberation, I extended an invitation to my parents as well. To my surprise, they not only attended but brought a housewarming gift, a beautiful handcrafted quilt my mother had made. I started it when you first bought this place, she explained as I unwrapped it. Then set it aside during everything. I thought it was time to finish it. The gesture moved me deeply. It represented not just acceptance of my ownership of the apartment, but acknowledgement of the journey we had been through. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, my father pulled me aside. I have something to tell you, he said, his expression serious, but not somber. Katie's moving to Denver next month. She got offered a position at a yoga retreat center there, a real job with benefits, teaching multiple classes and helping develop their wellness program. That's great, I replied, genuinely surprised. Katie had never shown interest in career advancement or relocation before. I think everything that happened forced her to grow up a bit, he continued. She realized she couldn't keep depending on us to solve her problems. It's a hard lesson, but probably one she needed. I hope it works out for her, I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish my sister ill. I just wanted her to take responsibility for her own life, rather than expecting others to sacrifice for her convenience. She asked me to give you this, Dad said, handing me an envelope. Said she'd rather you read it than try to have a conversation that might turn into an argument. Alone later that night, I opened Katie's letter with trepidation. Haley, it began. I'm not good at apologies, but I think I owe you one. I was wrong to move into your apartment without asking. I was wrong to act like I was entitled to it. And I was wrong to paint you as the bad guy when you stood up for yourself. I still think you could have been more flexible, but that doesn't excuse what I did. I'm moving to Denver to start fresh. Maybe when I visit at Christmas, we can try to talk without all this apartment drama between us. Katie. It wasn't a perfect apology, but from Katie, it was significant progress. The acknowledgement of wrongdoing, however qualified, was more than I had expected. It was a first step toward healing our fractured relationship. The following month brought another milestone, a family gathering to celebrate my father's 60th birthday. The event was held at Aunt Carol's house, bringing together extended family who had been drawn into the conflict through social media and gossip. I approached the gathering with apprehension, unsure how I would be received by relatives who had sided with my parents and Katie during the dispute. To my relief, most greeted me warmly, making no mention of the eviction drama. A few even pulled me aside to quietly apologize for their judgmental messages during the height of the conflict. We only heard one side of the story, my cousin Jim admitted. And family loyalty made us react without thinking. I'm sorry about that. Not everyone was so gracious. Uncle Mike remained cool toward me, clearly still disapproving of my actions. But even his frostiness had thawed from outright hostility to mere discomfort. Progress, even if imperfect. As autumn turned to winter, my restored apartment began to truly feel like home again. The negative associations gradually faded, replaced by new memories. Game nights with friends, quiet evenings with Tyler, Sunday morning coffee on the balcony, watching the neighborhood come to life. Dr. Reynolds and I had scaled back our sessions to monthly check-ins, focusing less on the family conflict and more on building healthy relationship patterns for the future. What have you learned from all this? She asked during our December appointment. I considered the question carefully. That setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary. That family love shouldn't be conditional on always saying yes. That sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. She nodded approvingly. And about yourself specifically? That I'm stronger than I thought, I replied after a moment. That I can stand up for myself even when it's terrifying. That I don't have to be the family peacekeeper at the expense of my own well-being. Those are powerful realizations, she observed. How will they shape your relationships going forward? I think I'll be more direct about my needs and expectations, I said. Less afraid of conflict and more willing to address problems before they escalate. And definitely more cautious about mixing finances and family. The Christmas holiday marked a full year since the beginning of the apartment saga. Katie returned from Denver for a week, staying with our parents in their new place. Our first interaction was awkward but not hostile, progress from where we had been. Your hair's different, I commented, noticing she had cut her previously waist-length hair to shoulder length. New city, new me, she replied with a small smile. Denver's been good. I'm actually saving for my own place there. Really? I couldn't hide my surprise. She nodded. Turns out having your own space is pretty important. Who knew? The self-deprecating joke, an acknowledgement of her past entitlement, caught me off guard. Perhaps she had grown more than I'd given her credit for. Christmas dinner was the first time the four of us, my parents, Katie, and I, had been together since the eviction hearing had been narrowly avoided. There were moments of tension, old patterns threatening to resurface, but also glimpses of a new, healthier dynamic emerging. I'd like to propose a toast, my father said as we finished the meal. To lessons learned the hard way. To second chances. And to family not perfect, but still worth fighting for. We raised our glasses, meeting each other's eyes across the table. The wounds weren't fully healed, the trust not completely restored. But we were finding our way back to each other, with new boundaries and greater awareness of the dynamics that had led us astray. As I drove home that night to my apartment, my home, secure in my ownership and boundaries, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for months. The journey had been painful, but necessary. Through it all, I had discovered my own strength and the true meaning of family. Not blind loyalty or unquestioning sacrifice, but mutual respect and support that honors each person's autonomy and worth. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't respect your property or personal space? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles can be incredibly healing. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might be going through similar family challenges. Remember, standing up for yourself doesn't make you selfish, it makes you strong. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage and clarity in navigating your own family relationships.